So there I am at a friend's wedding. It's before the wedding. I'm a groomsman in my friend's wedding. And everyone's standing around in their tuxes, looking all sharp and dapper and snappy. And we're killing time by playing pool. People are kind of nervous. Not everyone knows each other. The impending wedding is ahead of us, and we start playing. There's a pool table. I can't even remember where we were exactly, but there's a pool table. It's the middle of the day. And we start playing pool. And I don't know how people in other cities play pool, but in Seattle, when you play pool, two people play, and then whoever wins continues on and plays the next person. So if you win, you get to play again, and if you lose, then you don't get to play the next game. And so we start playing a game of pool, and I beat the first guy, and then I play the second guy, and I beat him. And then I play the third guy and I beat him. And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't usual. When I play pool normally, I would say I'm an average pool player with average people. I'll win some and I'll lose some. And there have been times when I feel like I could never win a game of pool. But for whatever reason, the balls were going my direction and everything was looking up for Kirk. And so I just kept winning. And slowly over time, I realized that the crowd in this room, most of which I didn't know these people, most of the people I didn't know, they were people that were attending this wedding. And they started to cheer for the people playing against me. So when I would mess up a shot, the crowd of people building around this pool table would cheer. And when my opponent would drop a ball, the crowd would cheer that person. Everyone was cheering against me, even though they didn't know me or the guy I was playing against. And it was the first time, and perhaps only time, this has ever happened to me, where I was Darth Vader. I was the New York Yankees. I was the old Chicago Bulls. I was that guy who wins all the time, and everyone else was the underdog. Everyone else was the underdog, and we all know how we love to cheer for underdogs, and I was the overdog, so naturally everyone was cheering against me. And it felt quite uncomfortable and quite strange. And so I don't remember exactly what I did, but eventually I did lose. And of course, the crowd erupted in cheering when I lost. And I think I may have thrown the game because I thought, my God, if I win again, this is going to be terrible. And so that was, again, perhaps the only time I've ever experienced the wrong end of the stick of being an overdog. And since then, I've really thought about why is it that we always cheer for the underdog, and why do we hate the overdog? Well, when I got an email from a patron to the podcast, her name is Winter, and she has her own podcast called Derbyface. That says it's like roller derby and like your face. So Derbyface. I don't know why she named it her podcast Derbyface. Maybe it's like Derby in your face, MFers. I don't know. But she emailed me and we decided to do a podcast together. I was interviewed on her podcast in which we talked about roller derby and the phenomenon of the underdog and all that stuff. So I thought I would just play that audio for you. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I am chair of the Couple and Family Therapy Program at Antioch University, Seattle, and I'm also a licensed psychotherapist. Okay, so let's just get to that interview. What do you say?
So what I wanted to talk about today is the phenomenon of rooting for the underdog. The weird thing about roller derby is that there's one team right now that's won for the past 4 years, the international championships. When they play, everybody's rooting for whoever they're playing to win. So I wanted to talk about why that is and what makes roller derby different from other sports. In that one thing I know that's strange is that there's no way for teams to get evened out. Like in football, they have the draft. In, baseball, they have salary caps. And roller derby has none of that. What it has developed is this powerhouse team in New York City. What are your thoughts about that? And what are your thoughts about the whole cheering for the underdog thing?
Well, the first thing I think about is how in love we are as a society, and maybe in other societies as well, with underdogs. It's such a love we have, like The Hobbit, we have this little guy who is among tall people who are very good at killing orcs and this sort of thing, and we identify with the little hobbit or Cinderella or even Frozen. I was thinking the movie Frozen. The younger sister, she's the main character. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
I am not that familiar with Frozen, unfortunately. Well, I don't know. Well, luckily, I would say...
That surprises me, because looking at your Skype picture, I see a young daughter, and so...
Yes, that picture's a few years old, and so thankfully, I haven't seen Frozen very much. I think I've only really kind of seen it once. So,
yeah.
But there are tons of stories about underdogs, and
Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker, Rocky. There's just something about that story that we love, and I just wonder, are we innately like that? Are we born to love the underdog, or is it our culture? Are these stories basically telling us to root for the underdog? Is it the chicken or the egg?
And I know you talk about that a lot. Like, is it evolutionary or is it culture? What causes this outcome in how we think as a culture?
Right. It's always hard to know if we are, quote unquote, naturally one way, or if we're acculturated or socialized into a system that creates that in us.
I'm not familiar with very many other sports, and my husband couldn't think of any other sport that he knew of that had such a powerhouse compared to all the other teams. So I do think we're in a really unique situation, and I was trying to think about ways to kind of humanize the Gotham team and maybe let people find out about the individual players and maybe help people get to know Gotham not just as the team that's better than everybody else, and it's not fair that they always win, but that they're athletes just like everybody else, and they are, doing the best that they can because that's what they're athletes who have to bring their A game to stay at the top.
So I'm not familiar with the world of roller derby. I've been to roller derby and I enjoy it, but I didn't know that there was a dominant team in New York. Are you saying that people hate this team because they always win?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, you asked about other sports, and there have been times in basketball and baseball and football where this has been true. Like in basketball, the Bulls dominated for a long time.
Right.
And everyone hated them except for Chicago fans.
Right.
And then the Yankees often dominate, and everyone hates the Yankees universally. And so I certainly can identify with that feeling of a dynasty team that just dominates.
Yep.
And how reviled they are, how evil they become, right?
Yep.
So the Gotham team, it's even an evil name, Gotham. So they're the evil New York, and it sounds like you want to humanize them. You want the fans to stop demonizing these players. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Well, and I haven't heard people demonizing the players very much, but yes, so a few weeks ago, they were at a playoff tournament and they, dominated. They won all their games by tons of points. And I like Gotham. I'm a fan of Gotham. So I went down and sat on the floor right by for their last game. And I was like, all right, I'm going to cheer for Gotham. I was excited to see them do well. And about halfway through the first period, I found myself cheering when the other team did good things. And I was like, what is going on? I can't even cheer for Gotham when I'm trying to. And that's when I realized there's something really deep-seated about that underdog love and the love for that underdog story and seeing the little guy do better than they are expected to.
Right. And it's a bummer for people that are on the Gotham team because unless you tell me some kind of evil story about how they built their team by behind the scenes crushing other people and doing something illegal or something, which isn't likely.
Nope.
Those players worked just as hard as everyone else in the league, and in fact, they might have even worked harder.
Exactly.
To some extent.
Yes.
And so, and you even said a word earlier. You said It's not fair that they win all the time, you said.
Right.
I don't know if you noticed you said that.
I did, actually. I wanted to talk about fairness. Yeah.
Right. Because the game is built on fairness. There's rules and there's refs and there's points. And if you win, then it's mathematical. So it's fair if someone wins, but it feels unfair if a team wins all the time. Right?
Right.
And I think that goes back to when we're children. We're taught to take turns. We're taught to have empathy. It feels like when a team dominates, I think deep down to us, it feels like they are not having empathy for us. If you were playing a friend, like in a game of, pickup basketball or something,
yep,
and your friend was just dominating you, and you're both putting a ton of effort into it. Eventually, you would think that person was a jerk.
Exactly.
Because at some point, they should be like, I should take it easy and pull back and let someone win, that kind of stuff. And I think we transpose that childhood morality onto sports. But of course, that doesn't make any sense in sports. If a team like Gotham were to pull back to let other teams win, that doesn't make any sense. No one would want them to do that,
right?
That wouldn't be a valid win. So I think that's part of it, is that this childhood morality gets transported into our adult life.
Yep. And the another interesting thing about roller derby is that it's not just about winning or losing; it's also about point spread. So in order to climb the rankings, teams have to do better than expected against teams they're playing. They have, kind of ranking power, and there's an expected point spread. And if Gotham doesn't beat the teams they play by that point spread, they'll actually fall in their overall ranking. So there's absolutely no room for Gotham to pull their foot off the gas or try out different things or let their B string jammers play a lot if they're up. I don't know if we want to see that, but I think it's important for us to realize that mathematically and because it's sports, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm also wondering, it just occurred to me for the first time, that I wonder if gender plays a particular role here to make people even more upset at a team like Gotham. Women are socialized in general, if I might be so bold to say this, to share and to be equal and to care about each other more than men are, right?
Absolutely, and put other people first.
Right, and to not dominate and to not win, to let other people win, essentially. And roller derby is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's all women, correct?
Yes, this roller derby is. There is a men's version, but this is all women.
And so I wonder if that makes it even worse for Gotham.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think gender plays into so much of our culture, but in roller derby in particular because of that, and women having to overcome what we've been taught, how we've been taught to behave, and kind of learn how to be athletes. A lot of people playing this sport didn't grow up playing sports or don't have a lot of background with sports. They got into roller derby because it was a cool thing to do. Their friends were doing it. At the top level, I think most of the people playing do have a lot of sports background, but not necessarily team sports. There isn't a ton of opportunity for girls and women to play team sports. So it's like we're learning all this all within roller derby instead of having been socialized to understand that you play as hard as you can for as long as the game goes. You don't worry about hurting the other team's feelings or
right.
even what the fans are thinking,
Right. Yeah, I mean, having said that, there is a thing in the sports that I've played growing up where if you were winning by a certain amount, you pulled back to not humiliate the other team. It was unsportsmanlike to just continue to push hard in the fourth quarter when you're up by 40 points,
Yes.
So I could see that, that's just a general cultural understanding. But I could see this going a number of ways. If women in the league don't come from a childhood of playing sports, because when you play sports as a child, if you play enough of it and you're an average person, you will win some and you lose some, and you learn how to win and how to lose. When I was young, I remember there were times when I was, I don't know, fifth grade or something, when I would really struggle with losing. It was really hard. But as time went on, I got used to it. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I was in high school, when we would lose, there was a mixture of feelings, but it wouldn't crush me. And then when I would look back on my behavior at the end of the game, I wasn't ashamed of anything I did. Whereas there's things I did when I was in the fifth grade at the end of games when we would lose, and I was just like, not quite so proud of,
Yeah.
So I could see how women in the roller derby league not benefiting from that early experience and having more difficulty losing in the roller derby league. But I could also see it going the other way, in that if you didn't grow up in a world where competition was so important, you might not care so much as an adult if you lose or win, because I find that some people, they just don't care if they don't care if they win or they lose.
Mm-hmm.
They'll try hard, but they're not going to lose their crap over losing. So, but it seems like you have some opinions about the reactions that people have when they lose. What is it like in the roller derby league?
Well, it's not so much like the teams that play against Gotham and lose. At this point, everybody knows the expected outcome, and I think the teams that play Gotham are trying to do better than expected so that, they have that feather in their cap and they feel like they played better than, everybody was expecting them to play. The atmosphere in the arenas when Gotham plays is a little bit of a bummer because everybody's cheering for the other team. You can always tell where the family members and the people from New York are sitting because they're the people cheering for Gotham. And that is great. And I would rather see a more evenly, well, I guess that's my cultural I want everybody to be nice to everybody. and maybe the fans get something out of booing Gotham or just being silent if, every time Gotham gets lead jam. I guess I want to see more recognition for the amount of work that those players have put in, and not just being, I guess, a little bit childish about, oh, well, they're just Gotham, and not wanting to see them do well when they are individuals like all the other individuals playing, and they've all put in tons of hard work, just like everybody else. It gets sad when it's so anti-Gotham in the arenas.
That's interesting. So when Gotham goes to play in any other city, everyone boos them with the most energy, whereas another good team who's like second in the league doesn't necessarily get the same treatment when they go on the road. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
That is really sad. I wonder what it's like to be them.
That's what I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, because they're just like anyone else,
exactly.
Right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but do you get paid? Is it a pro league?
No.
Yeah.
There are sponsorships and I think, league fundraising so that your costs are minimal, but it is not a pro sport.
Right. So you're volunteering your time essentially for fun and to entertain the crowd and to provide a competitive environment for everyone to, compete. And then everyone just boos you. It seems like bad sportsmanship on behalf of the audience. It seems that way, the way you're describing it.
Yeah, that's how it feels when I'm there. And sometimes, I get a little annoyed by something or whatever, and I have yelled. But overall, I guess I want to see more recognition and more like realization that these are people that have put in, the same amount of work and the same amount of time and deserve our respect. They've done nothing but play excellently for the past 4 years, and they deserve the recognition for that, and not kind of like, oh, well, they get the trophy, It's just
I know.
troubling.
I know what that feels like. Actually, now that we're talking about it, one time I was at a friend's wedding. It was before the wedding, I think, and we're all in our tuxedos and whatnot. And there was a pool table, and so I was hanging out with all the wedding party and the family, and we're all hanging out, and we're playing pool. And whoever loses, whoever wins plays the next player, right?
Okay.
And so I, for some reason, was doing really well, or everyone else was doing really badly, and I just kept winning. And I wasn't playing hard. It was just casual before a wedding. It wasn't like a competition. And then as time went on, because it went on for, I don't know, an hour or two, because we just had all this idle time. And by the third, fourth, fifth game, people started seriously cheering against me. And these were people I didn't know. These were family members. And I just remember that feeling of like, that's not nice. And that's not, I'm just playing pool. It's just casual. And when people were almost going to beat me, the entire room of like 30 people were just erupting and cheering for the person to crush me in pool. And I'm not even a good pool player, And I just remember thinking like, I'm just playing pool, you know what I mean? And I'm not a professional pool player, and it's not my fault that everyone else sucks at this. And so I started to throw my game. I started to purposely lose, because I was like, if I beat this guy when everyone's cheering him, what are they going to do with me with the next guy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they already have a narrative in their mind about who I am. As the game goes on, I'm the Gotham team. I'm that evil team. And so I was like, crap, I better lose pretty fast, or else there's going to be a riot,
Wow. So yeah, you know what it feels like to be Gotham. I've heard that they actually have practiced playing to booze so that they're not too, distracted by it.
Wow. Did they get like 100 of their friends to come boo them, or that seems like a lot of effort?
Well, I think that would be possible. At their all-star practices, I'm sure that they have enough other skaters. I don't know exactly how they did it, and it might be a roller derby myth, but it seems reasonable to
totally,
be flustered by that, and then because they are such a powerhouse, and that kind of shows how much that they want to overcome any obstacle so that they can still play their best game.
Yeah, another thing, you asked me about the psychodynamics part of it, and it's, of course, a little bit psychobabble, but the way that I see people is that as children, we internalize our relational experiences, and the more intense they are, the more repetitive they are, the more meaningful they are to us, we tend to internalize even more so, and it becomes a fixed part of our personality. And all of us grew up as children feeling weak when we were 1 year old or 2 years old or 3 years old. We knew we were small and weak and helpless and incompetent and could not win at any game with anybody. And that did not feel good to us. That felt terrible to us and humiliating and scary. And so when we grow up, we have retained that relationship experience with other people, that feeling of inferiority and that fear. And we don't like that part of ourselves. When we are at work or when we're trying to do something and we have the perception that we're not doing so well, that early experience emerges in us and scares us. If you're not doing well at work, it's not likely that you're going to get fired, and even if you do get fired, it's not likely that you're going to starve to death or get rejected by your family or something. But that's the way that black and white children think. And so when we're children, we're terrified of these kinds of things. And as adults, there's no reason to be terrified, but we still are terrified.
That makes so much sense. That whole inner child thing is where the weakness comes from. And it was hard for me to identify with the idea that we all feel weak and we all identify with the underdog. But when you think about it from a point of view from a child, that makes perfect sense to me.
Right. We've all been the underdog for a long period of time. I remember being 4 years old and watching all the tall people in a crowd and I couldn't wait to be as tall as them. I remember just feeling so scared, not scared, but just feeling really little and just at the mercy of other people. And we've all had that experience. And even though you might not remember it, you had it. And so when we have these internal difficulties, depending on and especially if you were made to feel that way by your parents, if they were alcoholic or if they were abusive or something, then you would have it even more so, right? And when we watch these teams, we impose these internalized experiences onto the world. Mm-hmm. So when we see Gotham, they become that scary other that we experience as a child. And when we see the team that's trying to win, the underdog, we see that part of ourselves, and we want that one to win to correct for what happened to us as children and for what happens to us at the office. But of course, that doesn't work because after the game, we still have that internal conflict, right? And no matter how many of the underdogs win, we'll still have that on the inside. So that's the fantasy, is that it's a temporary relief from that inner conflict.
Right. And that reminds me of something I think you spoke about in just your general sports episode about attaching our own self-worth and happiness to this team. And if that team wins, then it means, we take on that victory and that sense of happiness for ourselves, even if it's just momentary. It's very powerful.
Right. Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah. Other things are, that it's a well-studied phenomenon that we all have schadenfreude, right? You've heard of how we love it when other people have a hard time in life. We love when other people fail. It's a wonderfully satisfying thing to watch for us humans, is when other people fail.
Yes.
Makes
hoarders.
Us feel better. Like what?
Watching hoarders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so or really anything on TV, I mean, it's just rife with failure,
yes.
And so when we see Gotham, if they lose, it means we didn't lose, right? If they're humiliated, if Gotham beats another team, then that's what we expect to happen. And so the loser, you don't feel bad about them. You think, well, that Gotham's Gotham. No one beats Gotham. And so of course they lost. No big deal.
Right.
But if Gotham loses, it's titillating to us because we get a laugh on the inside at them. We get a point at Gotham and say, ha ha ha, you are a lesser person. You're humiliated right now because you were supposed to win, but you lost. And I am not you, which means I am better than you. That's the titillating aspect of Schadenfreude. Okay.
I would almost see it as like, if and when they lose, it's almost like, oh, they are human. And we all are equal again. And all's right with the world.
Right. That's
that
fairness.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but...
No, that's that fairness part. Yeah, we want things to be balanced.
I love all of the places we've gone with this, and I think it's been a really good discussion of the psychology of underdogs and with roller derby in particular. So thank you so much for being on with me. Thanks so much.
All right, it's just me again. That was an interesting episode. I want to thank Winter of Derbyface for inviting me to come on our podcast. If you out there have a podcast and you want me to be on your podcast, shoot me an email. We can certainly talk. If your podcast is lame, then I will absolutely reject you. I might not even respond to your email. Just kidding. I'm sort of a slut when it comes to this sort of thing, so... Well, that does it for another episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining me out there. And again, go to derbyface.com and listen to Winter's podcast. And also, please take care of yourself and take care of the overdogs and the underdogs, because all the dogs deserve our compassion and our love, because everyone deserves it, even the overdogs.